Respected dignitaries, our today's panel of guests and participation, a very warm welcome and assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanzil Shafiq, for your wonderful presentation of our ReWet projects and its future prospects. So in my articulation, I will try to discuss some of the finance-related issues for wetland restoration, and which is locally led. I'm Saifullah Khaled, working as assistant professor in finance based at Sheffield Hallam University, and also a climate finance lead for our ReWet project. So I'd like to start my articulation with a quote from Her Excellency Marina Silva, the Brazilian Minister of Environment and Climate Change. She said, "We have transformed nature into money, and now we need to transform money into restoration and the protection of nature if we intend to continue living." And just to show the value of the wetland restoration, we'd like to drop a link of a complementary report from our ReWet project on ecosystem services valuation. But overall, to have a broad perspective, wetlands store twice as much carbon as all the world's forests combined, making them essential for ensuring a stable climate and support for the livelihoods of over 1 billion people worldwide. But however, we are losing them at a rate 3 times faster than the forests. And just to bring that conversation and the focus on the country level from the international level, we would like to cite this Change Initiatives report published very recently. And they are discussing that over the past 4 decades, Dhaka as urban city has lost nearly 60% of its water bodies. And this is not equal in the different parts of the Dhaka. And the environmental toll is unevenly shared by the Dhaka South City Corporation, where it is slightly denser in population and weaker in green infrastructure, and that endures harsher heat stress and diminished ecological access compared to the Dhaka North City Corporation. Also, the report also emphasized that Dhaka's development trajectory has systematically violated nature's right to exist, regenerate, and support life. And it calls for urgent rights-based reforms to reverse ecological injustice and enable a sustainable urban future. Now, to set the tone for our today's pre-COP30 dialogue, I'll try to frame my discussion into these 3 broad areas. We'll start with a macro view of discussing the availability of the financial resources from the international platforms and also the local platforms, as well as we will also discuss the micro-level designing of innovative financial instruments. And we will finish with this conceptual lens of putting our focus on beyond justice concepts, either for nature or climate or even finance. So regarding the global commitment of funds, there are plenty of commitments, and we know what happened to the commitment at the end. But to reaffirm the money is coming to the right project and right place, we need to have this sometimes, the demarcation of the fund, the requirement of the demarcation of the fund. And that is what we have seen in COP26 Glasgow, where 12 donors, including the European Commission, they committed around $12 billion up to 2025 as part of new global forest finance pledge. And that is about protecting the finance, and to protect and restore wetlands is still remain unfunded. And the COP event does not actually pledge anything regarding the wetland-related climate finance. So from today's event here in Dhaka, and led by ReWet, we want to send this message as part of our pre-COP30 discussion for a global call for wetland-related climate funds, where we want the parties, they need to recognize the indispensable role of wetlands for climate, for biodiversity and the global economy. And they must commit to increase the protection of wetlands by funding their protection and also the restoration. At least it could be the equal size of the amount they have pledged for the forest finance pledge. So we want the wetland partnership and to secure a donor pledge at COP30 of at least $12 billion for wetland-related public climate finance. So that's about the international availability of financial resources for climate or nature-related finance. Now, if we try to focus on the country level financing, we can scale up the biodiversity investment, and we can encourage the institutions, the corporations, the financial and non-bank financial institutions, or the capital markets. I'm very pleased to see that in our today's panelists, there are guests who are coming from the central bank and also non-bank financial institutions. So it could be microfinance institutions or any financial stakeholders. They can come up to expand their investments through impact funds, through blended finance, or it could be public-private partnership to drive financial flows towards nature-positive solutions. So until now, we have seen that there are international finances coming, and there are possibility of having this pooling of local level fund, but we need an anchoring point for this global and local level wetland related funds. And here we are proposing Dhaka Wetland Restoration Fund, and our project is working on this concept. And very soon, probably all of you who are here in this dialogue as a guest, you will be reached out, and we'll be pleased to have your thoughts on these Dhaka Wetland Restoration related policies and funds. That is what is needed. And in Ministry of Finance and ERD, International Climate Finance Cell could be an anchoring point for this conversation. The fourth point is about policy incorporation. So rather than seeing these wetland or biodiversity or nature-related issues as silos, as policy, we wish the government and other stakeholders, they integrate that in their policies across all the policies in their investment and regarding financing. And that would lead to our today's workshop's question number one, how you think these policy level issues should be positioned, where wetland restoration and biodiversity protection is a priority. So moving on to the conversation to the micro level designing of this, we know that Bangladesh is fantastic in their meticulous design and globally recognized. Bangladesh is globally recognized as designing climate-related policies, but we struggle when it comes to the implementation in particular. So we could try to frame the conversation towards a direction where it might be helpful for the participants today to help and guide your thought process and to help us to show some reflective thoughts on this. So we want that instrument to be devolved and that is local led. That is what we are trying to do in this ReWet project. And we are proposing a concept or model of socio-biofin model for wetland restoration and equity. Allow me to slightly extend this concept of socio-bioeconomics of finance here. These are innovative models of development that prioritize the well-being of communities while maintaining the health of the ecosystem. So that's the difference from the conventional economic or financial models, where we prioritize short-term profits at the cost of the ecosystem, at the cost of the exploitation of natural resources, to benefit our financial stakeholders. In comparison to that, socio-bioeconomics or finance aim to create long-term solutions where economic development, social equity, and environmental preservation is a priority, and that's are interwoven. And this is to help the conversation to position this concept of socio-biofin model in the current COP30 conversation. the term that might be helpful to position these in the perspective of Latin American Caribbean region, especially in Brazil, where the underpins national policies and markets is the social biodiversity products. I don't try to pronounce this. It might be a mistake because these are written in Portuguese. So apologies for my pronunciation. Produtos da Social Biodiversity des. Fingers crossed. These frameworks aim to strengthen community-based economies, conserve native ecosystem, and enable equitable participation in the supply chain. So that is about framing the social and biodiversity issues in designing the financial instruments. Now, how we are going to design it, that's the question of the workshop today, and that's our second question. How you could think of designing a community-led financing mechanism solution for our ReWet project. Here I could put some prompt that might be helpful for the conversation to carry on. So you know that there are two sides of this Gulshan Baridara Lake. At one side, there are the largest informal settlements based in Karail. So the intervention, the financial design of the instruments at that side of the lake could be something that is coming from the lead where we can see the government who is leading these instruments. It might be the social safety net programs, specifically in the urban territory, which is largely absent. And it could be something that is rewarding the people for their work to preserve and restore their nature, which is the adjacent area where they live. So it could be, for example, Kadir Binimay Cut, the Food for Work program for the government that they can scale up as a climate-related social safety net or shock-responsive social safety net program, rather than inventing a new wheel. And on the other side of the lake, which is slightly more richer in financial income. So the private investment can come to that area where they might feel a little bit secure regarding their investment, and where the risks might be slightly lower. So different public-private partnership can anchor into those areas as part of this socially responsible investment framing, which is helping nature and biodiversity-related interventions. So at the end of the conversation, we'd like to end our framing of these financial products from this conceptual lens. Without it, this is incomplete. So we are having this conversation of climate-related justice, but now here we want to discuss this conversation, this concept or the lens of beyond justice or more than justice, which we can frame by the word of ihsan. So it is easier for Bangla audience to understand the insaf versus ihsan. So insaf is a concept which is now at the forefront after this July revolution. That is a call for justice, whether it could be climate justice or financial justice. And in ihsan, we are discussing about this call for beyond justice. It could be climate ihsan, it could be nature-related ihsan, or it could be financial ihsan. So this conceptual framework we have very recently presented in Royal Geographic Society in the UK last month, and we're publishing in the forthcoming book from Palgrave Macmillan in London. In next few slides, we'll try to give a slight summary and the differences of this justice and beyond justice concepts. So in the current discourse of the justice, environmental or climate justice, what are the limits of this current discourse? This is the minimum threshold that we are actually struggling for, and that is liability-based, that is compensation-based. We are asking for a distributive justice, which is procedural, and the recognitional pillars that is dominating this conversation. And this is rooted in Western legalistic traditions. So if we want some South-South or Southern concept in this conversation, we need something more than this justice conversation. And climate governance, we see in the finance conversation that reduced to the liability, that reduced to the reparation, that reduced to offsets, compensation, and which is less desirable, the climate-related debts. And justice collapses into technocratic transactions and tick box exercises. And that's what we can see in the corporation regarding the disclosures, be it finance-related disclosures, climate-related financial disclosures, or maybe nature-related financial disclosures. So here our positioning is, the justice discussion has been taken. For example, here we put that green transitions, necropolitics, that incites the inequalities, climate extractivism, and carbon classes, which is not expected. So as an alternative imaginary beyond or more than justice in many indigenous societies, and particularly which is available also in our part of the world, and our country can lead this kind of discussion about the ihsanic frameworks. And these reframes the loss and damage conversation into generative repair, and the conversation of finance or climate finance related issues into climate endowment or benevolent fund or altruistic fund, and the climate actions into pluriversal ethics of planetary care or alternative imaginaries of value. And that is the core ethos of our ReWet's work, which is grounded in co-learning, epistemic justice, relationships, and shared responsibilities. And we're trying to shift this conversation of externally controlling the funds and the mass reporting of those funds, which is led by that, to the locally led relational approaches, while continuously reflecting on whether the finance is really helping the people and shaping the people's future prosperity and helping them in spreading an ecosystem of financial ihsan. So on that note, on behalf of the ReWet Consortium, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you, every single of you who participated today's dialogue.